In today's video, we'll talk about the type of operator and certain scenarios that can make use of it. First of all, what is the type of operator? Basically, it's an operator that you can give anything to it, and it's going to spit back at you the type of whatever you gave it. Basically, if you say type of 1, it's going to give you back the number. And if you say type of, let's say, test here, it's going to give you a string, right? So simple enough. It just kind of spits back at you with a type as a string. Now, since typeof is actually an operator, there are two things to take into consideration. First of all, it cannot be overwritten. Like any other function in JavaScript, they can be overwritten, but this is not a function, this is actually an operator. So if I say typeof equals, for example, 1, that's going to give me an error. But that's wrong, because that's the same thing as saying plus equals 1. Like as if I want to give the plus operators the value 1. I cannot actually do that, right? At the syntactic level. So as tokens, typeof and the plus operator are basically in the same class. They are both operators, right? They are not functions. And the second important thing to note here is you don't have to actually add parentheses whenever you're using the typeof operator, since when you're using typeof, let's say 1, syntactically it's the same thing as saying plus 1. And when you're saying plus 1, you don't say plus and then you open and close parentheses and say 1, right? Same thing goes with typeof. You don't have to actually do this, right? You can just call it, you can just use it as is, because it's an operator, it's not a function. That's the main difference between the operator and a function in JavaScript, at least. Although do use parentheses whenever you're trying to evaluate an expression. So if I say, for example, typeof 1 plus test, we know that, well, this actually should give us a string, but what what it returned to us was basically the type of 1, which was number, and then it concatenated a test to it, and that's not what you usually want. So you would want to actually add a pair of parentheses, but that's because of not because of the fact that this is a function, but because of the fact that you want to first evaluate this 1 plus test and then actually give that to the operator, right? And that's going to give us a string, which is correct. So let's go over the return values of this type of operator. First of all, we have type of a number that gives us a number, simple enough. And then we can do type of a string, and that gives us a string, right? That makes sense. We can do type of a function, an anonymous function here, and it's going to give us function. So that's really nice. We can differentiate between actual objects and functions. If you give it, for example, an object, let's say that's poorly formatted, but anyway, that's going to give us an object. And if you give it a for example, an instance of a class, if you say new set, in my case, I can actually get an object as well. So they are basically the same thing for typeof. All right, but what about the undefined and null values and other strange values that there are in there? So if I try typeof undefined, you'll notice I actually get the string undefined. So this is like a special case for the typeof operator. We get undefined whenever giving it undefined. The problem with the typeof is that if I give it null, I actually get an object, right? And this can be a bit of a problem. So you're gonna have to check if whenever it's an object, you're gonna have to check for null. And one of the weirdest return values of the typeof operator is something that a viewer actually commented on a previous video, is the type of nan. And the type of nan is actually a number, even though nan actually signifies not a number. So this is very ironic, I think. All right, let's continue with the return types. So for the type of an array, let's say 1, 2, we're gonna get the return type object. So that's not great, because an array is not really an object, but behind the scenes in JavaScript, the array is actually an object where every single property is the index of that of each element, right? Then we have the type of a boolean. So if I say type of false, that's just boolean. So that's really nice. We can differentiate between a boolean and everything else. And one more niche value of the type of operator is type of symbol, and this guy will actually return the string symbol. So you can also differentiate between symbols and other types. So here's a sort of semi-practical example of a use case for this type of operator. Here I have a function that takes in any object, really any object with properties, and really counts the number of strings and numbers inside that object's values, right? So here we are iterating over the entries. I have made a video on what this actually means. You can check up top. But basically what it does is iterate over each every key value of that object, right, as a pair. So inside here I have both the keys and the values. I only make use of the value, so yeah, that's not really a problem. And what we're checking inside this if is if type of our value is a number. If it's a number, we know that we can actually increment our num numbers, and if it's a string, we can actually just increment this guy as well. And I'm just console logging this. So if I run this, notice I get 2 and 3 because I have already called this function with an object that has 3 values that are numbers. So 1 and 18.2 is a number, and then 9 is also, we learned from the previous segment that it's actually a number for type of. You can actually check this or make an actual so if, for example, I can say here if not is nan of value, then you should actually increment the num numbers. And if I try to run this, I'm gonna get only 2 here. So right, this will count. In our case now, it will count actually 2 because we have a as the value 1 and d as the value 18.2, and c is a number, but it's not. It's actually nan, so it's not counted, right? And then we have 2 strings. One of them is just test, so that's simple enough. And then the second one is actually type of number. And as we learned, type of always returns a string. So we get here the actual string number. As you can see here, it actually gives us the values that it can have, which is quite nice actually. And you can actually expand on this. So what if the value is actually an object? Well, you might want to recursively call it or continue checking the properties of that object inside our parent object, right? Or what if it's a function? Maybe ignore it, maybe actually give us an error, and so on and so forth. So that's basically everything there is to cover about the type of operator. I hope you got something out of this video. Leave questions down in the comments below or on our Discord server. We have an invitation in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you next time. Take care.